Welcome to the next episode of PHP Release Radar, this time about Laravel 10. And our guest tonight is Taylor Otwell. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You released, I guess, 4 weeks ago, Laravel 10, and
Yeah,
Laravel itself is, I guess, more than 10 years now, right?
I think Laravel is 12 years old in June of this year.
Oh, wow. And before we go much more into detail about Laravel, would you just give us some insights? How did you start with PHP and how did you become a developer?
Well, I became a PHP developer by accident. I was originally a .NET developer professionally. So I went to university and studied information technology, and then I was hired as a .NET and COBOL programmer for a large enterprise trucking company here in the U.S. It's a publicly traded large company with hundreds of programmers and DBAs and things like that. So I was doing .NET and COBOL and some classic ASP there at that job. And I had some side project ideas. And at the time, it was a little bit tricky to host, a .NET side project. It wasn't maybe as simple as just like Git pushing to Azure, like it
Hmm.
might be today or something like that. But I knew that PHP was pretty easy to deploy out to almost anywhere on the web very cheaply. Um, and that I could pretty much edit PHP in any text editor. I didn't need a Visual Studio to make it happen. So I started tinkering around with PHP in my free time, used a few frameworks like CodeIgniter, which I really enjoyed. But I wanted to bring some of my .NET, some of the features in .NET that I really liked, like my dependency injection container,
Hmm.
the templating system. I wanted to bring some of those things to PHP and specifically to CodeIgniter at the time. But I wasn't really able to do that without just really mangling how CodeIgniter works under the hood. So that's when I started building my own thing. But I didn't really intend to make it a big new PHP framework. It was really something I was building just for myself. And if no one else used it, that was perfectly fine. I was just building because the end goal for me wasn't really to build a framework. It was to kind of start a business where I could work from home and
Hmm.
kind of set my own schedule. So that's how I got started, and I put it out on the web, wrote documentation, and here we are.
So was it open source from the beginning?
Yeah, pretty much. As soon as it probably took me 6 to 8 months to build Laravel initially, and then once I had it finished and was satisfied with it, I thought it was decent enough to put some documentation around it in open source. And yeah, it was on
Hmm.
GitHub pretty much from the beginning.
Would you say the kind of the same success that Laravel now has would be possible without the open source thing and the community?
No, definitely not. Because Laravel wasn't really like an overnight success, but
Hmm.
it did develop like a sort of passionate community pretty early on, where we had some forums, message boards on our official Laravel website. People started making video tutorials. Laracast started, soon after Laravel came out, as well as there were some people writing ebooks like a person named Dale Reese in the UK wrote several popular ebooks about how to use Laravel, and those were very instrumental, I think, in uh, you know kicking off Laravel's popularity in the PHP world. And there was a few early contributors to Laravel, and I was doing sort of most of the development at the time, and then more and more people came on board.
And was there some kind of a turning point when you realized for yourself, well, that's something huge here, and now it's gonna, I don't know, skyrocket?
Um, it became more, I guess, serious for me when I started working on PHP full time at my day job. So I got an
Hmm.
email in December of 2011, and Laravel was only about 6 months old at this point. I get an email from a person named Ian Landsman who runs a company here in the US called Userscape, and they build HelpSpot, which is help desk software. And he says basically, hey, we want to rewrite some of our software. It's in PHP currently. It wasn't using any particular framework at the time. It was a kind of a long running PHP project before major frameworks even existed. And we want to rewrite some of it in Laravel. I really like it. Would you be interested in coming on board full time? So we sort of talked about that, and I ended up accepting that offer. And then that's when I really gained actually a bunch more time to work on Laravel, because for the first several months that I was even at Userscape after they hired me, Ian just let me work on Laravel full time. And that's when it became sort of a more serious project. It already had a decent number of users. It wasn't as popular as CodeIgniter or Symfony yet, but it was building a decent community, and that's when I built a lot of core features of Laravel, like database migrations, queues. All of that was built
Mhm.
during that time frame.
Okay. And you mentioned already that there is a passionate community almost from the start, and you committing time, almost full time, like it sounds. And what do you think is the main driver of the success of Laravel? So, was it the inspiration of being as easy as starting with PHP, or what do you think?
I think it's a mixture of things. I think um, the documentation was key. CodeIgniter had very good documentation, um, and I felt that that was instrumental in CodeIgniter's success. Was how approachable the framework was and how good their documentation was. And even though there were other frameworks even at the time that were maybe more technically superior or more advanced, they weren't as popular because they just weren't as approachable. So I think that I really focused on making Laravel's documentation as um, thorough as possible and as easy to read as possible. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, with the community, I was very involved in the community even from day one. So like I was in the Laravel forums answering questions, asking for suggestions, getting feedback. I did that pretty much on a daily basis. I was also in the IRC channel because there was no Discord or anything at the time. So I was in the IRC channel, talking to people. So I tried to be very sort of hands-on,
Hmm.
very involved in the community from day one. And then third was just the amount of material that community members were making, whether it be blog posts, articles, videos. Community members were generating a lot of content, which I think helped also boost Laravel's popularity.
And yeah, so you came just back from India doing Laracon, and the month before there was Laracon in Lisbon, I guess.
Hmm.
And is that something where you just thought, well, okay, now I have a framework and I have to do conferences, or is it something that you really also threw yourself in and thought, well, wow, that's amazing, let's do conferences?
Hmm. The first Laracon actually wasn't my idea.
Okay.
It was Ian's idea, my boss at the time. He thought we could do a small conference. I was sort of skeptical of the
Hmm.
idea that we even could get enough attendees to make it, worthwhile. But we basically, I think the theater we had the first Laracon in had a capacity of just 100 people, and we ended up selling out that conference. We had about maybe like 90 attendees, and then speakers on top of that. And it was a 2-day event. It was honestly a lot like the current Laracons, just much smaller. And so that was his idea, really, to kick off that first Laracon, and then we just kept going from there.
Okay. So when we talked about, it's the framework, it's the community, it's blog posts and video tutorials, it's conferences. What else is there in the Laravel ecosystem that brings the whole package together?
Um, I think one thing Laravel brought to, or one reason the Laravel ecosystem continues to be popular is the thoroughness of the ecosystem in terms of the amount of first party packages and features that we've
Hmm.
been able to put out into the ecosystem. So things like both on the open source side and the commercial side. So on the open source side, packages like Laravel Horizon, Laravel Telescope, Laravel Socialite, all of these tools that sort of augment Laravel to do all sorts of things, whether it be advanced Redis queuing or social login or debugging. All of these tools, both first party and third party, I think make Laravel special. So third party, we have really cool tools like Laravel Livewire. We also have Inertia, which lets you kind of use Vue and React and tie it with your Laravel app. And then on the commercial side, we have things like Laravel Forge for server provisioning and deployment, and now Laravel Vapor for serverless kind of auto scaling deployment. So all of these things, having this thorough of an ecosystem is pretty rare in open source. I mean, like Symfony has a pretty wide ecosystem. Ruby on Rails has a pretty wide ecosystem. There's just a few frameworks in the world basically that have these kinds of thorough ecosystems. So I think that was also pretty key in making Laravel a compelling choice.
And where do you get the inspiration to, well, let's do Horizon now, or let's do, I don't
Mhm.
know, Telescope? Is it something that you need for yourself, or where you get questions from the community?
Almost everything we've built has been something we need ourselves.
Hmm.
Especially things like Forge, Horizon. These were basically born out of personal or sort of shortcomings we were facing and problems we were having as we built out our own products. So most of the things have been in response to that. Some of the packages were ideas of employees of Laravel. So, like Laravel Telescope was not my idea; it was Mohammed Saeed's idea, who was an employee of Laravel at the time. Um, but most of the other packages are born out of my own personal, frustrations with problems I was having while building things with the framework.
Well, that's a very constructive solution, I guess. So it ends up.
Yeah, and it's always been a win-win situation because I think when you're building something like that, even if no one else uses it, at least we really were trying to solve our own problem. If
Mhm.
other people find it useful and use it, that's great. But the main goal was to sort of overcome this problem we were facing.
All right. So I think on the Laravel.com website on the enter ecosystem there are 19 right now, 19 different things. There's also the core team, of course. I think nine
Hmm.
people from Australia up to US where you are located at this time.
Yeah.
How much time do you have to actually work on those tools or the framework?
Um. So, well, just roughly what my day looks like in general is for the first like hour or so is just catching up with customer support requests. I still handle all refunds, billing, things like that. Also, reviewing any pull requests that the Laravel team has sent in, typically on our commercial products like Forge or Vapor or something like that.
Hmm.
Then also handling just open source GitHub pull requests. I'm still really the main person that handles every pull request that comes in to the entire Laravel ecosystem, with the exception of a few packages like Laravel Valet and Laravel Homestead. But every other package, I pretty much review every pull request that comes in. And then I would say by about 10 in the morning, I've got that pretty much wrapped up. And then for the rest of the day, can work on whatever, needs to be worked on for that day. It's pretty much open at that point.
And after 12 years, you still have new ideas and energy to work on the framework, and it's going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, so far, there's periods of time where we don't have any big ideas. A couple years ago, there was a period of months where I didn't really have any ideas on the horizon. But then Laravel Octane came to mind, and I started working on that pretty furiously. So, it ebbs and flows, but eventually some idea surfaces. Right now, we've got several ideas that we're working on, and yeah, I never seem to totally run out of energy for working on Laravel, just because I still enjoy it a lot, and other people seem to still enjoy it. So as long as the community is still finding it useful, I just keep working on it.
Yeah, I saw some videos and pictures from Laracon in India, and it looks like
Mm.
you can really get energy from conferences like that, and it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the lack of conferences during the pandemic
Hmm.
era were, a little bit had a bit bigger of an effect than I thought. So it is nice to get back to in-person conferences because I think you're right. It does sort of energize the whole community in a way, and keep things fresh and exciting in a way that wasn't really possible just online.
Yeah, so we touched it already, the Laravel ecosystem and the 19 different tools that are around there, and we prepared a little game, and let's see. Um, I
Okay.
checked it up front with Nuno, and he said, well, play it, it's a good idea. And
Yeah, so it's his fault. If it, we hope it's fun, and we really don't hope that it doesn't come across as like a gacha thing, because we have a few tricky things in there,
Okay.
but we're really confident you can do this. So what we decided on doing is a Laravel ecosystem logo quiz. So yeah, Christopher already mentioned we have all those different tools and they have logos. And the main thing about those logos is that they, I mean, have different colors and different looks, but
Mhm.
they're still icons, and kind of abstract. So we figured it would be fun. Can you still recognize those icons out of
Mhm.
context? So, as a first one, which one of these is not a thing from Laravel?
I would say D is not a thing in Laravel.
That's good. That's the thing where I thought that's the meanest, because it kind of fits in nicely.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
font
this is just
awesome
comes second.
in this case.
yeah.
All right, so next one in a similar vein, which one is not a thing in Laravel?
B is not a thing.
Yeah, that's right. It's Blackfire, and again, but let's
It
turn
does
it
look
up a
like
notch.
it could be.
Yeah, right. That's the main thing about this icon, not goofy things. Uh, so this one's a little bit trickier. So we have four icons now. Can you tell us which products they belong to?
So one is Telescope, two is Spark, three is Sanctum, and four is Breeze.
It's way too easy. Way too easy.
Yeah,
I've been doing
I-
Laravel a long time. But
yeah, that's true. All right. So here we change it up a little bit. We change the color. Let's see if you can still recognize which one is the real icon for Nova.
yeah, I think the real one is C.
Again, spot on.
So the
Okay,
last one,
final
maybe the
one.
last one.
Yeah, let's see. This is a really mean one.
This one's
So
actually is pretty tricky. I think it's ooh, I think it might be B, but it could be A.
it's actually B. You're right.
Oh, okay.
Oh wow.
I thought it probably was B. Yeah. That was definitely tough. That was a tough one though.
Yeah. Okay, but we're quite happy that we got all of them, and we don't
Oh,
feel like,
nice.
oh no, this is a mean thing to do. But yeah, so we talked a little bit about the ecosystem, about everything that made Laravel great. And one great thing about Laravel is version 10, which was released in February. And yeah, let's maybe start with some key facts about the release. Can you tell us a little bit what is Laravel 10 about?
There was a few things that went into Laravel 10. So, I'll preface this by saying that our release philosophy, I guess you would say, has changed over the years. In maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we used to have two major releases a year, and we would pretty much hold back every feature until those releases. So we didn't really release any new features in between those major releases. But a couple of years ago, we switched to one release per year. And in conjunction with that, we started releasing new features as long as they were not breaking changes. Of course, we started releasing new features pretty much whenever they were done. It didn't matter if that was on a major release date or not, because the major releases became really only that were necessary either from our own changes or sometimes from upstream third party packages that had breaking changes that sort of forced our hand to have a major release. So that has had the consequence of making our major releases the past few years not have as many huge features in them because we're shipping things all throughout the year. So in Laravel 10, we basically use that as an opportunity to introduce more method type hints and return type hints on the Laravel skeleton. Um, so when Laravel was first written in 2011, I pretty much used every type hinting feature that was available at the time. That was PHP 5.3. That was not even in PHP. Uh, there were some primitive types, I think, just for array, but there was no like string type hint. There was no Boolean type hint. So we pretty much used what was available in PHP 5.3. And ever since then, we haven't really updated the skeleton or the core code because we didn't want to introduce like breaking changes that were that significant. But in Laravel 10, we basically finally did update all of the method type hints and return type hints in the skeleton to pretty much everything you can do in the current version of PHP. So we added all the primitive type hints, all the return type hints to all of the methods in the skeleton. So that was a pretty big project because it didn't just involve the skeleton, it involves all of the skeleton, all of the stubs where you can like generate a controller, generate a model in Laravel, and then also all of the stubs and all of the first party packages throughout the Laravel ecosystem we also had to update, as well as all of the documentation, all of the package documentation, and all of the Nova documentation. So this was like a pretty big, all encompassing project to bring everything up to date as far as typing goes in PHP. So that was a big, big undertaking for Laravel 10. We also released a new first-party package called Laravel Pennant, which is again born out of some things that we were doing in Laravel Forge and some needs we had where we were sort of beta testing features in Laravel Forge, mainly related to how we provision servers and things. And we had kind of built our own little homegrown feature flag solution for Forge, but we decided to turn that into a package and release it open source. That was written by Tim McDonald, who's on the Laravel staff. So those were two of the big things. A third big thing was a new layer for interacting with external processes, which was sort of prototyped by Nuno Maduro, who's on Laravel staff, and then I sort of worked with him to bring that to the finish line and finish it up. So those were sort of the big three features in Laravel 10, I would say. And then there was a handful of other smaller things, but those were the major key points.
Touching on the return times that you mentioned, after the release, a few people ran into a few issues there, mainly with the controller stubs, where obviously instead of response, you can return other things as well as a convenience thing. So
yeah, and we before we released this, Nuno and I talked about the controllers. We knew the controllers were the hardest things for us to make any assumptions about because you can return strings, integers, arrays, collections, models, views, responses, or you cannot return anything at all, which will just generate an empty 200 OK response, basically. So we knew that was going to be tough. So we were kind of torn between response or the mixed type hint. Neither one of them are actually perfect because with response is probably worse than mixed because so many people return things that are not responses, views being the most common. But then even mixed makes it where you can't just return nothing, which is something that we actually do pretty commonly, is just have no return at all if we just need an empty response. So we eventually backed out the return types on the controllers and just left that in the developers' hands because there's just not really a great way for us to know what you're going to return. Even if we were to come up with some sort of interface that covered lots of different things, we couldn't really apply that to primitive types like integers or arrays or strings. So we just decided to back out the controller return types. So I think what people could do is just publish the stubs, which we allow you to do in Laravel using a stub publish artisan command, and then you can actually modify the stubs to your liking so that every time you generate a controller, it uses your version of the stub instead of Laravel. So that would allow you to basically add return types for your preference, but Laravel doesn't have any opinions there anymore.
That's good to hear. Hopefully that will make it a little bit easier for people who just start with Laravel 10.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned regarding the changes of release schedule that now it's not like a major release has all this new stuff in there because it's trickling out through the year. And I remember a while back you also tweeted, I hope I'm phrasing it right, like oh, I kind of regret doing the semantic versioning thing. Do you still feel that way, that it would be nice to still have this nice big release where we can show this is all the stuff we worked on and give it as a kind of big bang, this is actually something that's really cool, and not just trickle it out?
Yeah, I think like I see both sides of the argument. Like semantic versioning, is a standard that everyone sort of understands these days because most composer packages use it. The you know the other approach to versioning, which some people call like romantic versioning, is useful from a marketing perspective. Especially for big framework packages like Laravel or Symfony. When people see the major version change, they expect a lot of new things. Kind of like a new iPhone or something. So that was useful from a marketing perspective. I think overall semantic versioning has been fine for us. It hasn't been like that bad of a situation, and it's just something that everyone understands. And I think it is sort of nice that Laravel pretty much works like every other composer package in that regard, so you don't have to learn a new versioning scheme that's unique to Laravel. But I can definitely sympathize with both sides of the argument, and I don't think we would go back to the old versioning scheme at this point. It would just be too confusing.
And regarding the new release, we are already at 10.0.4. So you already made a few patches. How's your policy around those? Do you try to get them out as early as possible, especially after release? Or do you think it's like better to batch them up a little bit to actually see if it's like it solves a little bit more of a bigger issue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've done it both ways. So we have a Laravel release every Tuesday, and if there's new features, we increment the minor version number, of course. And if it's just like patches or bug fixes, we only increase the patch number. Sometimes we release patches immediately. Like last night, I just tagged a patch to revert change from a pull request that ended up being breaking on Postgres databases, and I just tagged a patch immediately because if it's breaking applications, I'll pretty much always just tag it immediately if we're reverting something. If it's like a very minor thing that's very obscure, um, we
Is it just me?
Sorry, I think your audio is gone. Yeah, I can't hear anything.
Taylor, do you hear us? We
Yeah.
can't hear you
So
right now.
we still don't hear you.
So they are coming in the first questions. So maybe if you have another one, just post them. I will ask in about a minute when Taylor comes back, I hope. Let's see.
All right, you try.
Test. Am I working now?
Yes.
Yes, now we can hear you again.
Okay. All right. I got a phone call, and it went to my computer as well, my MacBook, and it seemed to totally mess up the audio.
Yeah, the handover can be tricky, especially with the Apple headphones. So we were talking about patch releases, and you said last night you reverted something, and so that's your approach. If something breaks anything, then you try to get it out as fast as possible, right?
Yeah, typically if something breaks, we would tag a release immediately, especially if it's pretty serious. But we do releases every Tuesday. So if we're close to Tuesday, like if it's Monday or Sunday, we may just go ahead and wait until Tuesday, especially if it's not a very major bug fix.
So if I may, there are two questions in the chat right now. One is more serious, the other one I don't. Let's see. The serious question, how big is the Laravel staff team that's on some sort of payroll? So I guess the question here is more about the sustainability of open source, right? So you at this point can afford to pay people to work on Laravel.
Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, essentially 9 people, including David Hemphill, who helps with Laravel Nova. He's basically the co-founder of Laravel Nova. So 9 people, and I don't think open source is actually super sustainable. Even though that I have 9 people on staff. I think Laravel has 9 people on staff because of Laravel Forge and Laravel Vapor and these commercial businesses that are built around Laravel. I couldn't actually have any staff just through Laravel donations. We just don't receive enough donations or anything like that to make that sustainable. And even other projects like Vue or Livewire, they're selling ad space, on their website. So to me, they're sort of selling a product on their website, and they're selling ad space, in return for money. So I think very few projects can actually be sustainable from a pure open source perspective, sadly. But there's just not that many people that donate to open source projects, especially open source projects that they don't perceive to be like the foundation of their business. So, for example, if you were to build like a date parsing library, it's a very important library that might be used by hundreds of thousands of applications, but for some reason, people never seem to donate to libraries like that. I don't know why. It's sort of a hard problem to solve, I guess. But I think GitHub sponsors is, making a good effort to make sponsoring open source more common, and hopefully that continues to grow for people. But I should finish by saying I don't actually think you should even do open source if you're hoping to make it sustainable. Like, if you're hoping to get paid for doing open source, I think you should just release a paid product from the beginning. You shouldn't try to release it open source and then sort of be sad when it's not sustainable. Like, if it's probably not going to be sustainable. So if that's your goal, you should just make a paid product.
Yeah, I guess so as well. So open source is not a fast lane to financial success.
No, it's not a fast lane. No.
But the other question, which is, I presume, more about meant to be funny. What is about a package called Laravel Lambo? Is it coming, and what would be in that?
We don't have any packages being built called Laravel Lambo, but I guess it would have to be pretty fast package. But we don't have anything coming in that way. Hopefully, I wouldn't want to get a trademark infringement from Lamborghini.
All right, then maybe a few more serious questions. So regarding the new release and especially the ecosystem around Laravel, you already mentioned that there are lots of community things built around Laravel. So how do you approach them when you do a new release? Probably, since you said new features trickle out slowly, it's probably not so much about the new major release, but more minor releases. Do you involve them? Do you get feedback from them? Stuff like that?
Yeah, I try to get feedback from sort of the group of, I don't know what you would say, major package developers in the Laravel ecosystem. So there are certain groups of people that release a lot of packages, like the development agency Spotsy in Belgium. They have hundreds of Laravel packages. And then core people that are sort of influential package creators like Caleb Porzio, who created Livewire and Alpine.js, or someone like Jeffrey Way, or even someone like Adam Wathan, who created Tailwind. There's sort of people I just ask for feedback on what they think about certain Laravel features, and just to sort of poll the community. And then, of course, sometimes I'll just ask on Twitter directly what the sort of user base at large, at least the user base on Twitter, thinks about certain ideas or certain features. Or I might tweet a link to a pull request so that people can discuss it there. But yeah, I think feedback is really important, and some of the best ideas have come out of that kind of feedback.
And how does it work the other way around? So Symfony, for example, did the PHP upgrade in the minor release, which maybe could cause some problems for people using Symfony components. So how did that work out for you and for Laravel in general? Did the active communication help there?
Um, it didn't cause us any big problem that I'm aware of. There have been a few times where we've communicated with Symfony developers, either on privately on Telegram or via email to sort of coordinate or think about how changes will affect the two communities, because we are sort of tied together in a way through our use of Symfony components. But that's pretty rare. We've only probably had to do that a couple of times in the past 12 years. And of course, Laravel's only been using Symfony components for probably like the last maybe like 8 years, 8 or 9 years. But yeah, we haven't had to have much communication in that regard, and everything has worked out pretty well.
That's good to know. Then at least the projects can work independently and innovate independently.
Yeah, we actually do work surprisingly independently. I think because Symfony's release schedule is standardized and well known, and usually we know of pretty much what's happening many months before it takes place, so we have a lot of time to prepare or send feedback over. But again, it's pretty rare that we would even have to do that. I also think that Symfony is just generally pretty conservative in terms of breaking changes in general, so that again makes it rare that we have to communicate across teams.
All right, and maybe switching a little bit to your users and to Laravel. Is there anything as a user from Laravel 9 coming to Laravel 10, upgrading the application, something they should be aware of, something that's like maybe a gotcha moment or something where they should set aside time before upgrading?
Thankfully, I think that the upgrade to Laravel 10 is pretty smooth. I think all of our upgrades have been getting a little bit faster over the years. So there's not anything huge in Laravel 10 that's a big gotcha. If you're using Laravel in a pretty standard way, I don't think you would really run into much of anything. I would expect it to only take 10 or 15 minutes to update to Laravel. And I think a lot of applications actually will just be able to compose or update and be done, and probably not have to make any changes at all. I think that's probably pretty common.
All right. There's one question coming up. What is your favorite aspect of the PHP community?
Oh gosh. I think the PHP community, of course, I'm mainly familiar with the Laravel side, but I think it's just a very kind of energetic community that likes to build things and likes to experiment with things. I think, it's pretty cool that they've stuck with PHP this long, just PHP being around for quite a while now. I think it's cool that a lot of people are still using it to build interesting web applications, and that the language continues to improve, this far into its life cycle. So hopefully that continues.
All right. Then you already mentioned that essentially starting an open source project, assuming that you get funding, is probably not the way to go. But anyhow, probably you still like to get support in Laravel, like pull request something. So what is, if you say money isn't that big of an issue because luckily you can monetize the products around it, how can people support Laravel in other ways, or maybe even with money as well?
So monetarily, you can always use GitHub sponsors, or if you subscribe to something like Laravel Forge or Vapor or Envoy, or if you purchase Laravel Nova or Spark, that supports Laravel and our staff, of course. Through contributions, people can either contribute to the code, or if you're not really comfortable contributing to the code, you can contribute to the docs, which are all written in Markdown and are easy to update and to modify. Those are on the Laravel/docs GitHub repository. And sometimes it's useful for people who are new to the framework to contribute to the docs, because they can see things that, we can no longer see because we're not new to the framework anymore, and we can't really see it through the eyes of a beginner. So sometimes they have the best feedback in terms of the documentation because they're actually experiencing using the framework for the first time. So I think it's a good place to contribute. And then, of course, always creating educational material is really useful for the community. So either in your native language or something like that, there's a lot of people that create content for their particular geographical community, and they become, really useful and popular to that segment of developers. I think that's something that people can contribute as well.
Right, thanks. Maybe one final question before we go to the open Q&A. You mentioned already Pennant, the new feature of Laravel 10. Do you already get feedback from users there? Do you know if it's already actively used? How quickly are people to adopt those new features?
I don't have any hard stats on how much it's used. I know it's already being used in production by some applications. I don't know how many, but people tend to use these things pretty quickly, it seems like, because we start getting pull requests, issues, feature requests pretty quickly after things are released. So I know it's already being used out there. It's a pretty simple package to use and to adopt. So hopefully people continue to use it.
Right, thanks.
So right now, we already threw in all the questions that came through the chat. So I guess
Okay.
we're all good there. Um,
Okay.
did you, Dennis, did we talk already about where Laravel 11 is headed and what's coming up?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, maybe you can tell us something about that.
Yeah, so right now we're working on 3 or 4 different packages, actually. We haven't really started working on anything particular to Laravel 11. We've been mainly focused on these 3 or 4 packages, a couple of which I showed at Laracon India. I showed Laravel Folio and Laravel Volt. And we're going to continue working on those packages until Laracon US. And then we have a couple of packages I haven't shown anywhere yet. But hopefully we'll show those at Laracon US as well. So most of our efforts right now are focused on package development, which I kind of like because we can get the packages in the hands of people sooner, and they're sort of optional add-ons to Laravel that don't require us to, add more weight to the framework itself. They're just things you can pull in and use if you need to. So that's where most of our effort has been focused right now in terms of new development.
So, but you're only telling us there are packages that you're working on, but that's about it, right? So that's
Yeah, so like Laracon India, I showed Laravel Folio, which was a page-based routing package similar to
Mhm.
Next.js, and then it pairs up with. It's not required to pair up with Laravel Volt, but it pairs really nicely with Laravel Volt, which adds single-file Livewire components. And we've even, since I've demoed Laravel Volt at Laracon India, we've continued to improve that already. Actually, myself and Nuno Maduro have been working on that, and I think it'd be pretty cool once we get to Laracon US and we have time to firm it up a bit and make it even better. I think it'd be pretty exciting.
Sounds good. There is another question. Laravel is one of the major contributors to the PHP Foundation. What is the
Mm.
benefit? And are there any features that you would like to see added to PHP?
Um, we were contributing to the PHP Foundation mainly just to try to help the sustainability of PHP itself. A lot of the people that used to work on PHP, the language, seem to have moved on to other things, either new jobs or they're not really working on PHP anymore, just due to life circumstances or whatever. So I think that the PHP Foundation is trying to sort of recruit a new generation of PHP core developers, which I think is important for, obvious reasons of keeping PHP running into the future. Um, so that was really our only goal. As far as new features in PHP itself, I can't say there's a ton of new features that I just really have to have. I think multi-line short closures would be cool. Um, continuing to make PHP faster, I think, is always a welcome improvement. If you don't know what else to work on, I think making it faster is always like a welcome thing that you can work on.
Yeah.
But I think PHP is actually pretty good as far as I'm concerned. I know a lot of people want things like generics and continued improvements to the type system, which I think would also be cool. But even if we don't get those things, it's not like my life would be over or anything. I still enjoy using PHP.
All right, great, thanks. So I think that's already it. Thanks for your
All
time,
right.
Taylor.
Yeah,
It was
thanks for
really,
having me.
really interesting. I hope you had fun as well. And
Yeah.
to the people out there, is there something you want to add at the end?
Just thank you for all of your, continued support on Laravel the past 12 years. It's been a really fun journey working on this framework, and I look forward to continue working on it for years to come, hopefully.
That's great news, and we hope that you will have the energy and the ideas to bring it to the next level all over again.
Yeah, I hope so.
So thanks everyone for joining in, and see you next time. Bye.
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 Thanks.